Aria Bennett stood near the tall window of the Collins estate, her fingers brushing absent-mindedly across a row of colour samples for her next design project. The soft gold light of late April poured in, touching the silk curtains and catching the edges of a crystal vase, a birthday gift from Ryan, back when things still felt new. She was turning 35 tomorrow, but instead of joy, an anxious knot sat heavy in her stomach. The house was too quiet, almost like it knew something unpleasant loomed. A firm knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Ryan stepped in, tousled hair and tired eyes, his presence once a comfort, now a mirror of her inner exhaustion. "Thinking about tomorrow?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. Aria nodded. "Your mother's planning the whole evening. Again." Ryan sighed but stayed silent. For 3 years, Aria had tried to carve space for herself in this house ruled by Helena Collins. Elegant, icy, and mercilessly controlling. From the moment Aria crossed the threshold as Ryan's wife, Helena made it clear she was not welcome. Every smile masked judgment, every compliment came with a bite. Helena never raised her voice, but her words could slice through skin. Ryan had grown up in this, learning to avoid conflict, to smooth over chaos with silence. His father, Thomas, kind but timid, followed suit. "Mum just wants to make the night special," Ryan said weakly. Aria forced a smile, refusing to start another argument. But inside, she felt the pressure building, the years of being ignored, blamed, and belittled taking their toll. Ryan had lost his job months ago, and though Aria picked up more clients to help them stay afloat, Helena blamed her for everything. A designer with fantasies, not a wife with real value. As Ryan kissed her goodbye before work, Aria watched him leave, her reflection in the glass, looking like a ghost in someone else's home. She whispered to herself, just one more birthday to survive. But she had no idea this one would change everything. The calm before the storm had arrived. The evening of Aria's 35th birthday began with glittering wine glasses, a long oak dining table dressed in white and silver, and a guest list curated by Helena Collins herself. Aria sat at the far end, dressed in soft blue, her eyes flicking nervously between her husband Ryan and the woman who had made her life a quiet battlefield. Helena smiled with calculated grace, raising her glass to welcome the guests, but her gaze held the edge of a dagger. "Let us toast to Aria," she said, "who has certainly brought colour to this family." A ripple of forced laughter followed. Aria's hands tightened under the table. For 3 years, she had endured this subtle cruelty, passive jabs dressed as compliments, exclusion hidden in elegance. Ryan gave her a weak smile, but said nothing. He had lost his job months ago, and since then, his spine seemed to vanish every time his mother entered the room. Helena had blamed Aria, loudly and often, for Ryan's downfall, calling her distractions silly decorating dreams. Tonight, Aria had hoped for something different, a break in the tension. Instead, she got the final blow. As the guests finished dessert, Helena stood and placed a hand on Aria's shoulder, smiling as she addressed the room. "And let us not forget, dear Aria's greatest talent, surviving on charm while others carry the weight." Then, in front of everyone, she slapped her daughter-in-law across the face. The room fell into shocked silence. Aria didn't cry. She rose, stunned but steady, and walked out the door. Ryan didn't follow. If you think Aria deserves better and believe truth always finds its voice, comment yes below and subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge silence. The air outside was cold, but it was freedom. That night, Aria packed a small suitcase, left the estate, and vanished into the city's quiet streets. She left behind the guilt, the pretense, and the woman who had humiliated her for the last time. What Helena did not know, what no one knew, was that Aria was about to uncover a secret buried deep in her garden. A secret that would not only shift the power in the Collins family, it would burn everything to the ground. The morning after her birthday, Aria returned to the Collins estate, not to beg for forgiveness or reclaim her place, but to confront the storm still simmering inside her. The estate grounds were quiet, the staff pretending not to notice her as she marched toward the garden Helena adored more than any family member. Those delicate peonies, rows of them in perfect bloom, had always represented Helena's cold perfectionism. Beautiful on the outside, but rooted in something rigid and unforgiving. Aria, armed with only a small gardening spade and pure fury, dropped to her knees and began tearing into the soil. Petals flew, roots snapped. She wanted Helena to feel even a fraction of what she had endured. But just as she struck a cornerstone buried beneath the earth, the spade hit something solid. Curious, she cleared the soil and unearthed a sealed metal tin wrapped in waterproof cloth. Inside were old letters, tied in blue ribbon, and a worn leather-bound notebook. She hesitated. The top envelope was addressed to Helena, the handwriting unmistakably Thomas's. Her heart pounded as she read. The letters told of an affair Helena had hidden for over 30 years, with a man named Victor Saunders. The child born from that affair? Ryan. Aria staggered back, breathless. Everything, the way Helena had clung to Ryan, her possessiveness, her need to control, suddenly made sense. Thomas had known. The letters made it clear he had forgiven Helena, but kept the truth buried for the sake of Ryan's happiness. Aria felt the weight of the secret press against her ribs like iron. She could use this. She could destroy Helena. But another letter, written by Thomas to Ryan but never delivered, gave her pause. It was filled with quiet love and a father's hope that truth would never break the boy he raised. Aria's hands trembled. She had found Helena's deepest shame, her weapon, her revenge, but she also held Thomas's fragile peace. What would she do with it? The answer wasn't simple, but one thing was certain. Aria was no longer a victim. She was holding the truth now, and it had teeth. What she chose next could either redeem or ruin them all. Aria sat in the dim light of her apartment, the letters spread out before her like stolen confessions. The city hummed beyond the windows, oblivious to the family-breaking truth resting on her coffee table. Lana, her best friend since college, leaned over her shoulder, her expression bouncing between disbelief and fury. "You could destroy her with this," she whispered. "Make her crawl." Aria said nothing. The pages detailed everything: Helena's affair, Thomas's heartbreak, the truth about Ryan's paternity. The very foundation of the Collins name was built on a lie. A beautiful, well-tended lie, just like those perfect peonies in the garden. Lana slammed her hand on the table. "After what she did to you, you should leak this, publicly. Let her choke on her own secrets." Aria looked up slowly. "And Ryan?" The words hung in the air. He was innocent, yet a part of everything. Her husband, her heartbreak, her silence. Later that evening, she found herself standing outside the Collins house again. Not for vengeance, but for closure. But before she could knock, the door opened. Helena stood there, no makeup, robe loosely tied, a woman stripped of her armor. "I thought you'd come back," she said. "You found them, didn't you?" Aria's breath caught. Helena stepped aside, letting her in without another word. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Thomas was away, Ryan still at work. Helena poured 2 cups of tea with trembling hands. "I buried those letters because I thought shame could rot if left alone. But it doesn't. It just waits." Her voice cracked. "I know what I did. I've spent every year since trying to control everything around me so no one would look too closely. Especially Ryan. He was all I had left of Victor, and I didn't want to lose him." Aria watched her. For the first time, Helena looked human, small, defeated, and maybe, just maybe, ready to tell the truth. Aria left without promising anything, but one thing had shifted: power. She now held it, not out of spite, but from knowing the truth no longer owned her. The war between them had changed, and Helena knew. The next move was no longer hers. The silence in the Collins dining room was deafening as Victor Saunders stepped through the doorway, his presence like a ghost returning from a forgotten past. Ryan froze mid-step, the colour draining from his face. Aria watched him closely, her heart thudding. She had known this moment would come, but nothing could prepare her for the weight of it. Victor's eyes, soft but aged with regret, searched Ryan's face as if trying to piece together the years they had lost. "I never wanted to disrupt your life," Victor said gently. "But I've watched from a distance too long. You deserve to know the truth. From me, not from whispers." Helena stood behind the grand staircase, visibly shaken but saying nothing. Thomas, calm and composed, stepped forward and placed a steady hand on Ryan's shoulder. "He may have given you life," he said quietly, "but I was there for every step of it." Ryan turned to Thomas, his eyes wet. "And I never doubted that." The days that followed were heavy with emotion. Ryan barely spoke to Aria at first, needing space to process the truth. He wandered the estate alone, staring at photo albums, reading the letters Aria had kept hidden until now. But it was not anger that gripped him. It was sorrow, a sense of lost time. In a quiet moment on the back porch, Ryan finally sat beside Aria. "You knew," he said, "and you didn't tell me." "I wanted to," she replied, "but I was afraid it would crush you. I didn't want to be the reason you lost your family." Ryan shook his head. "You weren't the reason. They did that themselves. But you helped me hold it together." He reached for her hand, his grip firm. In that small gesture, forgiveness took root. Later that week, Victor and Thomas sat together for the first time, two men bound by a secret and a son. There was no rivalry, no pride, only shared understanding. Ryan made the choice no one expected, to accept them both. He had spent his whole life searching for truth through the lens of loyalty. Now, he finally saw that family could be built from forgiveness, not just blood. The Collins home, once a monument to control and unspoken truths, began to breathe differently in the months that followed. Aria, whose presence had once felt like an intrusion, now moved through the house as if she had always belonged. Her design work picked up again, this time with clients who appreciated her sharp eye and quiet confidence. Ryan, no longer weighed down by the expectations of being the perfect son, began to rebuild his own career. Freer, lighter, and Helena, surprisingly, changed too. She no longer barked orders or offered backhanded compliments. Instead, she spent hours in the sunroom, painting again for the first time in decades. One afternoon, as Aria passed by, she noticed Helena sketching the beginnings of a portrait, of a younger version of herself, standing alone in a garden. It wasn't polished or perfect, but it was raw, vulnerable, a mirror to the woman she once hid from the world. Helena looked up. "I used to paint when I was pregnant with Ryan," she said softly. "Stopped the moment I realized I'd have to raise him in a lie." Aria didn't respond with pity. Instead, she nodded. Maybe it's time to start over, not to forget, but to create something honest. Weeks later, the family gathered around a pale blue crib in what had once been the unused guest room. Aria cradled their newborn son, Ryan Thomas Bennett, his tiny fingers curled against her chest. Ryan stood beside her, tears in his eyes as he whispered, "He's got your strength." Helena stepped forward, placing a hand on her grandson's back. "And your heart," she said to Aria, voice thick with emotion. Thomas watched from the doorway, a quiet smile on his face. Victor stood beside him, equally still. Two fathers joined not by rivalry, but by respect. In that moment, the past did not vanish, but it softened. Forgiveness had not come easy, and trust had taken time, but the love surrounding that small baby was real. Aria glanced down at her son and knew the cycle had been broken. This child would never know the weight of buried lies, only the strength of truth and the power of choosing grace. And though Helena would never forget her past, she had finally found a way to paint a new future. On a quiet morning, wrapped in soft winter light, Aria sat by the window, cradling her son, Ryan Thomas, against her chest. The Collins estate no longer felt like a cage. It breathed differently now, softer somehow, as if the walls had let go of their secrets. In the nursery she designed herself, filled with gentle hues and handcrafted pieces. She watched her child sleep, his breath steady and peaceful. Behind her, Helena stood silently, holding a small canvas. It was the finished portrait, the one she had started months ago, now complete. Not just of herself, but of a woman holding a child in a blooming peony garden. For the first time in years, Helena's hand had captured something honest. Ryan entered, kissing Aria's forehead before gazing at the scene unfolding between his wife and his mother. "I never imagined we'd come out the other side like this," he murmured. Aria smiled. "Neither did I. But the truth has a way of healing, if you let it. Yet even as love took root again, and forgiveness painted new memories across old walls, the past was never truly gone." One afternoon, while sorting old files in Thomas's study, Aria stumbled upon another sealed envelope. It bore Victor's name, but not his handwriting. Inside, it was a second set of letters, this time addressed to someone else. Another secret, another story. Aria held it in her hands, heart pounding, knowing the piece they had rebuilt might soon be tested again. Because in this family, truth had a long shadow. And though healing had begun, the past still whispered through the halls. If you followed Aria's journey from silence to strength, and you believe truth always finds its voice, comment yes below and subscribe for the next chapter. The story isn't over, it's just beginning.